When Olivia Carter walked into that restaurant for her birthday dinner, she already knew she would be treated as an afterthought. It had always been that way. But what her family didn't know, what they couldn't possibly suspect, was that this would be the last time they ever looked down on her. Because tonight, everything was about to change. The quiet suburban streets of Maplewood, Virginia, were bathed in the golden light of morning as Olivia Carter gazed out the window of her small apartment. The trees outside swayed gently in the early autumn breeze, and the world felt strangely still. Today was her birthday, but there was no excitement in her chest, no eager anticipation for celebration. She had long stopped expecting that. For 37 years, she had shared this day with her twin sister, Madison Carter. Yet their birthdays had never felt equal. She glanced at the calendar on her wall, where the date had been circled in red, not in excitement, but as a quiet reminder that she could not forget what was coming. After finishing her morning shift at the Maplewood Public Library, Olivia returned home to prepare for the dinner her parents had arranged. She pulled a navy blue dress from her closet, simple and understated, much like herself. As she fastened a delicate silver chain around her neck, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked composed, but there was something in her eyes, something beneath the surface, an exhaustion that ran deeper than the lack of sleep or the weight of the day. It was the look of someone who had spent a lifetime being overlooked. Madison would arrive at the restaurant in one of her designer dresses, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. Their mother would immediately light up at the sight of her. Her father's face would break into a proud smile, and Olivia would become the background once again. It had been this way since childhood. Growing up, the differences between them had been subtle at first. Olivia was the quiet one, the bookworm who found comfort in the worlds hidden between pages. Madison was the star, the girl who turned heads wherever she went, whose laughter filled every room like a melody everyone wanted to hear. Their parents, Judith and Charles Carter, had made their preference clear early on. Olivia's straight-A report cards earned little more than a polite nod, while Madison's cheerleading competitions and talent show performances were met with thunderous applause. The pattern continued into adulthood. When Olivia graduated with honors in literature, they barely acknowledged it. But when Madison landed a job as a sales associate at an upscale boutique, the family toasted her success over an expensive dinner. Even birthday gifts had mirrored their dynamic. While Madison received luxury handbags and fine jewelry, Olivia got second-hand books and handmade scarves. Her mother always said it was because she preferred simple things. But Olivia had always known the truth. Investing in her was never a priority. She turned away from the mirror and walked toward her bookshelf, fingers grazing the spines of books that had become her greatest companions. Nestled between them was a small, framed photograph. It was the only picture in her apartment that truly mattered. In it, she was standing beside her grandmother, Eleanor, the only person who had ever seen Olivia for who she really was. Grandma Eleanor had been her anchor, the one who whispered words of wisdom when the rest of the world made her feel invisible. She had passed away 5 years ago, spending her last days in Olivia's apartment, while the rest of the family was too busy to visit. Before she died, she had given Olivia a small wooden box. "Open this when the time is right," she had said. "Your heart will tell you." For 5 years, that box had remained untouched, hidden away in the back of Olivia's closet. There had been moments when she had almost given in to curiosity, but something always held her back. Tonight, however, as she reached for her handbag, her gaze flickered toward the closet door. The weight of the past pressed against her chest. She hesitated, then stepped forward and reached for the box. Her fingers traced the grain of the wood, the memory of her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. But after a long pause, she exhaled and set it back down. Not yet. On her way out, she passed by the kitchen table, where a newspaper lay open to a financial report. The headline was grim. Her father's construction company was on the verge of collapse. For the past 3 years, they had struggled, layoffs had begun, and whispers of bankruptcy loomed. Yet despite their financial troubles, Judith and Charles continued to fund Madison's extravagant lifestyle. Just last month, when Olivia had asked for a little help with repairs in her apartment, They had dismissed her request, saying things were tight right now. The very next week, they had covered the cost of Madison's car repairs, because she really needed it. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then grabbed her keys and walked out the door. By the time she arrived at the restaurant, the sun had started to set, painting the sky in hues of deep orange and violet. The Blue Orchid was one of the finest dining establishments in town, a place Olivia would never have chosen for herself. It was the kind of place where the air smelled of wealth, where every detail was polished to perfection, where the waitstaff moved with practiced elegance. The kind of place that Madison fit into effortlessly. She checked her reflection in the glass doors, straightened her posture, and stepped inside. A hostess greeted her with a warm smile. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Olivia said. "Carter. The name is Carter. Right this way." Her heart pounded as she followed the hostess through the dimly lit restaurant, toward a table near the back where her family was already seated. As expected, Madison was glowing, dressed in a shimmering emerald gown, a delicate gold necklace resting against her collarbone. Judith and Charles were leaning in, captivated by whatever story she was telling. A glass of champagne sat in front of her, catching the light like a jewel. Olivia reached the table, and for a fleeting second, no one even noticed she had arrived. Finally, her mother glanced up. "Oh, Olivia, there you are." She checked her watch. "You're a little late." Olivia's eyes flickered to the clock on the wall. It was 3 minutes before the scheduled time. "I'm not late," she said evenly. Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, we're all here now. Sit down." Olivia pulled out a chair and settled in as the conversation resumed around her, as though she were nothing more than an extra at her own birthday dinner. She glanced around the table. The appetizers had already been served, wine had been poured, and for a brief moment, she wondered why she had even bothered to show up. Then she remembered. This time would be different. The waiter poured another round of wine as laughter rippled across the table, but Olivia wasn't a part of it. She stirred the stem of her glass, watching the rich red liquid swirl while her parents leaned in eagerly, hanging on to Madison's every word. Their voices blurred into background noise, another reminder of how easily she faded into the edges of their world. She had barely taken her seat, yet she already felt invisible. Madison, glowing as always, was in the middle of an animated story about a high-profile client at the boutique. So then, she looks at me and says, "Madison, darling, you have the best taste. I simply must have everything you recommend." She giggled, sipping her champagne. Of course, I told her the diamond-studded heels were an absolute must-have for this season, and she bought them without hesitation. Can you believe it? $20,000, just like that. Judith placed a hand over her heart, beaming. "Oh, sweetheart, that's incredible. You always had such a gift with people. It's no wonder they adore you." Olivia pressed her lips together. The same warmth never touched their voices when they spoke about her. Charles nodded approvingly. "That's my girl. Always a natural at making connections. It's no surprise that people trust you. You have an eye for these things." "I do, don't I?" Madison preened under their praise, adjusting the delicate gold necklace around her collarbone. "It's why the boutique's owner trusts me with the VIP clients. Not everyone has my instinct." Her father chuckled. "You've always been special, Maddie." There it was. Special. The word they never used for Olivia. Before we continue the story, I want to connect with all of you, my incredible viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop the flag of your country in the comments below. Now, back to the dinner where things are about to take an unexpected turn. The conversation moved seamlessly from Madison's elite social circle to her latest weekend getaway. "Palm Beach was divine," she sighed, running a manicured hand through her perfect curls. "The spa at the resort? Unbelievable. Mom, you have to go sometime. The facials alone are life-changing." Judith lit up at the idea. "That sounds heavenly." It was. "And the private cabana? Best part of the whole trip." Charles grinned. "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've been working so hard." Madison batted her lashes. "I do work hard. Olivia set her fork down. The resort she was raving about wasn't just any place. It was one of the most exclusive oceanfront retreats in the country. A single night there cost more than Olivia's rent for 3 months. She hadn't planned on saying anything, but the question slipped out before she could stop herself. Wait, when did you go to Palm Beach? Madison turned to her with a bemused smile. Last month. Olivia's stomach clenched. Last month was when she had asked their parents for a little help with her apartment maintenance. Nothing extravagant, just minor repairs that had been piling up. We're tight right now, they had said, but they had found a way to fund Madison's luxury vacation without hesitation. She took a slow breath, willing herself to push it aside. The waiter returned, clearing away the plates. Charles clapped his hands together. All right, let's get to the fun part. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes. Birthday gifts. Olivia already knew how this would go. She had seen the pattern repeat year after year, but she remained silent as her father handed the first envelope to Madison with an affectionate smile. For our golden girl. Madison tore it open eagerly, and the moment she saw what was inside, she gasped. No way! She turned to their parents, eyes wide with excitement. A week-long getaway in Hawaii, all expenses paid. Judith clasped her hands together. You deserve it, sweetheart. It's a reward for all your hard work. Olivia's fingers curled around the stem of her wine glass. She wasn't even surprised, but that didn't dull the sting. Her father turned to her next, handing over the second envelope. And for you, Olivia. She accepted it cautiously, feeling how light it was compared to Madison's. When she pulled out what was inside, the room seemed to shrink around her. It wasn't a plane ticket. It wasn't even a gift card. It was a single old postcard, a faded image of the Grand Canyon, edges slightly bent, the ink on the back smudged from time. A lump formed in her throat. What is this? Her mother's smile was overly sweet. Oh, Olivia, you're a library person. We thought this was perfect for you. Madison snorted. Wait, isn't that the postcard I got years ago? I was going to throw it away. She giggled, flicking her hair over her shoulder. Well, I guess it's yours now. Olivia's fingers tightened around the flimsy card as Madison leaned in with an amused grin. You love books. Just use your imagination, Olivia. Picture yourself there. Her father chuckled. You're always traveling through books anyway. What's the difference? The waiter passing by hesitated for a second, his brow furrowing as he overheard the exchange. Even a stranger could see how humiliating this was. Olivia swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep her face neutral. For 37 years she had endured this. The disregard, the favoritism, the way her needs, her achievements, her existence had always been secondary to Madison's. But something about tonight felt different. Something inside her shifted. She looked at the postcard in her hands, not as a symbol of neglect, but as a catalyst. She had stayed silent all her life, but tonight that silence would end. A slow smile spread across her lips. She set the postcard down carefully on the table, smoothing it out with her fingertips before lifting her gaze to her family. Thank you, she said softly. Judith blinked, as if thrown off by her lack of reaction. What's this? You're not going to sulk. I'm not dissatisfied, Olivia said. Her voice was calm, steady. Actually, I have birthday gifts for all of you too. The air around the table shifted. Her father furrowed his brows. Her mother tilted her head in confusion. And Madison smirked, already amused. You have presents for us? She said with a little laugh. I didn't think you could afford anything fancy on a librarian's salary. Olivia reached into her bag, fingers grazing against the polished wood of the box she had left untouched for 5 years. She pulled it out and set it on the table. This, she said, is from Grandma Eleanor. Judith stiffened at the mention of her mother. What about her? Olivia ran a thumb along the carved lid. She told me to open it when the time was right. And tonight. She lifted her eyes, meeting each of their gazes in turn. Tonight, I think it's time. Her mother's expression wavered. Charles frowned. And for the first time all evening, Madison's confidence faltered. Something in Olivia's voice had changed. Something in her had changed. And before the night was over, they would all realize it. A heavy silence settled over the table as Olivia's fingers traced the polished wood of the box. The low hum of conversation from the other diners faded into the background, the clinking of silverware and the distant murmur of music barely registering. Her mother's eyes flickered with impatience, her father's brow furrowed with curiosity, and Madison looked amused, as if this was all some elaborate joke at Olivia's expense. "Grandma told me to open this when the time was right," Olivia said, her voice calm but firm. "And tonight feels like the right time." Judith scoffed, shifting in her seat. "Oh, Olivia, honestly, are we really doing this now? At dinner?" Madison smirked. "I mean, unless there's a diamond necklace or a hidden fortune in there, what's the big deal?" She leaned back, swirling the wine in her glass, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the stem. Olivia ignored them both. Her hands were steady as she lifted the lid. Inside the box, nestled between the aged wooden walls, was a single brass key and a yellowed envelope. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she picked up the envelope and carefully unfolded the letter inside. The familiar handwriting of her grandmother stretched across the paper, each word written with the same graceful precision that Olivia remembered from the notes Eleanor used to leave her as a child. She took a breath and began to read aloud. "My dearest Olivia, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. And if you are opening this box, it means you are at a turning point in your life. I have watched you grow into a woman of quiet strength, of patience, of kindness, even when those around you failed to see your worth. But I have always seen it, my love. And now, it is time for the world to see it too." Judith's expression twitched, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. Charles cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. But Olivia kept reading. "True wealth, my dear, is not measured by what we own, but by the choices we make with what we are given. However, there are times when external wealth becomes necessary to create change, to break free from the chains that have held us back. And so, I leave this to you." Olivia paused, her breath catching for just a moment before she continued. "This key unlocks something that belongs to you, something I spent years preparing, something I knew one day you would need. It is yours now, Olivia, and with it, the power to decide your future." She set the letter down. The silence was absolute. Judith's fingers curled around her wine glass, her knuckles white. "What exactly does that mean?" Charles leaned forward. "Unlocks what?" Olivia reached into the box and pulled out the key, holding it between her fingers. "It unlocks a safe," she said evenly. "A safe that contains something Grandma left for me." Madison let out a sharp laugh. "Oh my God, are we actually doing this? What, did Grandma stash away some old coins and dusty jewelry? This is ridiculous." Olivia didn't respond. She stood, slipping the key into her pocket. "Come with me," she said simply. Judith frowned. "Where?" "To my apartment." Her father checked his watch, clearly uncomfortable. "Olivia, it's late." "Tonight," she interrupted. "This can't wait." There was something in her tone, something unwavering, something unfamiliar, that made them hesitate. Even Madison, who always had a sarcastic remark at the ready, fell silent. One by one, they reluctantly stood, following Olivia out of the restaurant. The drive back was quiet. Nobody spoke, though Olivia could feel the tension thickening with every passing mile. When they arrived at her apartment, she led them inside without a word, flicking on the light as they stepped into her small but cozy living room. Judith wrinkled her nose, glancing around. "Honestly, Olivia, you could do so much better than this tiny place. If you just sit down," Olivia said. The sharpness in her voice startled even herself. Her mother blinked, stunned into silence, before reluctantly settling onto the couch beside Charles. Madison remained standing, arms crossed, clearly unimpressed. Olivia moved to the corner of the room, knelt down, and carefully pried up a loose floorboard. Beneath it was a small, locked safe. She withdrew the key from her pocket, slid it into the lock, and turned it. The latch clicked open. Inside, there was another envelope and an old leather binder, its edges worn with age. Olivia took them out, setting the binder aside as she unfolded the envelope. The official seal of the State Lottery Commission gleamed under the dim light. Her parents leaned in, confused. Madison rolled her eyes. What now? Another sentimental letter. Olivia looked up. No, she said. This is confirmation that I won the lottery last week. Judith's mouth fell open. Charles sat up straighter. What? Madison blinked, as if she hadn't heard correctly. Wait, what are you talking about? Olivia set the paper down in front of them. $350 million, she said. Grandma played the same numbers for years. She told me to do the same. And last week, those numbers finally hit. The room was utterly still. Judith's breath came out in a shaky gasp. 300 and... She pressed a hand to her chest as if struggling to breathe. Charles let out a stunned exhale, rubbing his temple as if trying to process the impossible. Madison's expression flickered. Shock, disbelief, and then something darker. Desire. Her lips parted slightly. So, that means we're rich. Olivia's jaw tightened. I am. Madison let out a breathless laugh. Oh, Liv, you're hilarious. She reached for the paper as if touching it would make it real. But seriously, we're family. Obviously, we'll split it. No, Olivia said simply. Judith's head snapped up. Olivia, don't be ridiculous. I'm not. Charles leaned forward, his voice taking on that familiar fatherly tone, the one he used when trying to reason with her like she was a child. Sweetheart, we're talking about a life-changing amount of money. Of course, you'll want to take care of your family. Olivia's hands rested on the binder, steady. That depends. Judith stiffened. Depends on what? She looked each of them in the eye before speaking. On whether you deserve it. A heavy silence followed. Madison scoffed. Are you serious? What kind of question is that? We're your family. Are you? Olivia's voice was quiet but cutting. Because the way I see it, I was never really a part of this family. Not in the way Madison was. Her mother opened her mouth to protest, but Olivia shook her head. For 37 years, I was an afterthought. The one who was expected to settle for less while Madison got everything. Even tonight, you handed me an old postcard while you gave her a luxury vacation. She took a slow breath. But tonight things change. I'm the one in control now. Madison's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't actually cut us off. A slow smile curved Olivia's lips. Wouldn't I? The fear flickered across her sister's face, followed closely by desperation. Judith's voice wavered. Olivia, please. We'll talk, Olivia said, cutting her off. But not tonight. Next week. With lawyers. Madison paled. You're bringing lawyers? Of course, Olivia said smoothly. This is a business decision, after all. For the first time in her life, she watched as the balance of power shifted in the room. Judith looked helpless, Charles looked lost, and Madison looked terrified. And Olivia, for the first time, she felt truly seen. A week later, Olivia sat at the head of a long conference table in a sleek, modern office. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the room. Across from her sat her parents and Madison, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and unease. Beside Olivia, her lawyer, a composed man in his 50s, adjusted his glasses as he laid out the official documents. Judith clutched her purse tightly in her lap, her face carefully composed but betraying a flicker of desperation. Charles sat rigid, his hands folded, while Madison, usually so effortlessly confident, looked visibly on edge. The past week had been a storm of phone calls. Some pleading, some demanding, all of them ignored. Olivia had spent years waiting for their attention. Now they were waiting for her. She let the silence stretch before speaking. I've given this a lot of thought, she said, her voice measured. And I've made my decision. Madison leaned forward eagerly. You're splitting it with us, right? Olivia met her sister's hopeful gaze with an unreadable expression. Not exactly. Her mother inhaled sharply. Olivia, I'm setting up a structured trust. Olivia continued smoothly. One for Dad, one for Mom, and one for Madison. Each will cover necessary expenses, housing, medical care, and a sustainable income. But there will be conditions. Judith's mouth opened and closed, her composure cracking. Conditions? Yes, Olivia said. Dad, your trust will pay off the company's debts. If you want additional funds, the company needs to be restructured with transparency and fairness. No more backroom deals. No more mismanaged funds. If you're willing to build something ethical, you'll have the resources to do it. Charles let out a shaky breath, nodding as though he had no choice but to accept. And Mom, Olivia continued, turning to Judith, your trust will provide for your retirement and medical expenses. But you won't receive lump sums. Instead, you'll get a fixed monthly amount like a pension. Judith's expression twisted. So you're giving me an allowance? Call it what you want, Olivia said evenly. But I call it accountability. Madison sat up straighter, her impatience showing. And me? Olivia folded her hands in front of her. Your trust comes with the strictest conditions. Madison's lips parted in protest, but Olivia held up a hand. First, all of your debts will be paid. But after that, you'll only receive a monthly stipend on one condition. You have to get a job outside of luxury retail. Something real. Something that teaches you responsibility. And every month, you'll donate a portion of your salary to charity. Madison let out a sharp laugh. That's ridiculous. No, Olivia said, her voice firm. What's ridiculous is how you've lived your entire life believing you were owed everything. This is a chance to prove you're capable of standing on your own. Madison's face flushed, a mixture of anger and humiliation. You can't seriously expect me to work some boring job just to get my share. Olivia tilted her head. It's not your share. It's mine. And these are my terms. Judith clutched her pearls, desperation creeping into her voice. Olivia, sweetheart, this isn't fair. We're family. Olivia let out a quiet laugh. Funny. That's the first time you've ever said that when you needed something from me. Her father exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. So that's it? Those are our only options. Yes, Olivia said simply. Silence settled over the room, thick and heavy. For years she had been powerless. But not anymore. Judith's hands trembled, but she knew there was no room for negotiation. Charles finally nodded, resigned. Madison, still seething, clenched her jaw but said nothing. Olivia's lawyer slid the contracts across the table. One by one they signed. When the last pen was set down, Olivia stood. You'll receive your first disbursements next month. She gathered her things, the finality of it all settling over her. And Madison? Her sister looked up, eyes wary. If you ever try to manipulate me again, if you think you can guilt me or scheme your way into more, consider your trust permanently revoked. Madison flinched. For the first time in her life, she realized there were consequences. Olivia turned and walked out of the room, the weight of decades of neglect, resentment, and hurt lifting off her shoulders. She had won. 1 year later, Olivia stood at the grand opening of the Eleanor Foundation, named in honor of the one person who had always believed in her. The organization focused on providing educational support and resources for underprivileged children, offering them the opportunities she had never been given. The foundation's headquarters stood in the heart of Maplewood, a place that had once felt too small for her dreams, but now held the promise of something greater. Her parents kept their distance, ashamed but comfortable in the life her structured trusts provided them. Her father's company had started fresh under new management. Her mother, though bitter, had settled into a quieter life, no longer the glamorous socialite she once pretended to be. But Madison's transformation was the most surprising. At first, she had fought against Olivia's conditions, furious at the idea of working a normal job. But when her spending was controlled, when she had to navigate life without an unlimited safety net, something changed. She got a position at a nonprofit through the foundation's outreach program. It started as a way to meet Olivia's requirements, but somewhere along the way, Madison stopped seeing it as a punishment. She found herself connecting with the people she worked with, realizing, for the first time, that life wasn't just about designer labels and VIP guest lists. As Olivia walked through the foundation's courtyard that afternoon, she spotted Madison helping a young girl with a school project. Their eyes met across the space. Madison hesitated, then gave her a small nod. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a declaration of love. But it was a start. That night, as Olivia sat in her office, she gazed at the framed photograph of her grandmother. The memory of Eleanor's gentle voice filled her mind. The time will come when the world sees your worth. She smiled softly. That time had come. Some stories remind us that power doesn't always come from wealth. It comes from knowing your worth and refusing to let others define it for you. Olivia's journey wasn't about revenge. It was about taking control, about choosing her own path, and about proving that sometimes, the ones who are overlooked the most are the ones destined to shine the brightest. Now, I want to hear from you. If you loved this story, comment number 2 below. If you weren't a fan, comment number 7. I want to know what you think. And if you want more powerful stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Mr. HeartVibes for more content that will keep you hooked until the very last moment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.